In the 19th century, Philippe Charles Joubert, a Frenchman with an undiagnosed medical condition, suffered two horrifying brushes with premature burial. The first time, Joubert collapsed into a death-like state, showing no visible signs of life. His family, believing he had passed, arranged a funeral. Just as he was about to be lowered into the ground, a gravedigger heard faint sounds from inside the coffin. When it was opened, Joubert gasped for air. He had been alive the whole time. Doctors were baffled, but Joubert recovered, only for the same thing to happen again years later. This time, his apparent death lasted even longer, and despite his protests from the first incident, he was declared dead once more. Unfortunately, no one was around to hear him the second time. By the time they exhumed his body for examination, it was clear he had woken up underground and desperately struggled to escape, but this time, he never made it out. In 1884, the crew of the Mignonette, a small British yacht, faced an unimaginable ordeal when their vessel sank in the vast South Atlantic. Stranded in a tiny lifeboat with almost no food or water, they drifted for weeks, growing weaker by the day. Among them was a young cabin boy named Richard Parker, who had fallen severely ill from dehydration and hunger. Years before the real-life event, Edgar Allan Poe had written a novel about a shipwreck where a character named Richard Parker faced a disturbingly similar fate. In the early 20th century, a woman named Marie-Madeleine Gauthier from France suffered from a rare and horrifying medical condition known as fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, FOP, a disorder that slowly turns muscle and connective tissue into bone. Nicknamed the Stone Woman, Marie-Madeleine's body began to lock itself in place, as new bone formed where it shouldn't. Over the years, her joints fused together, restricting her movements until she was trapped in a second skeleton of her own making. FOP is so rare that only about 1 in 2 million people are affected. The condition has no cure, and even minor injuries can trigger uncontrolled bone growth, further imprisoning the person in their own rigid frame. By the time of her passing, Marie-Madeleine was almost completely immobilized. Michel Lotito, a French entertainer known as Monsieur Mange-Tout, or Mr. Eat-It-All, became famous for his astonishing ability to consume objects no human should be able to digest. Born in 1950, he developed an unusual condition called pica, which led him to crave and eat metal, glass, and rubber. Over his lifetime, Lotito ate entire bicycles, shopping carts, televisions, and even a coffin, handles included. But his most unbelievable feat? Eating an entire airplane. Over the course of 2 years, he gradually consumed a Cessna 150, breaking it into small pieces and washing it down with mineral oil. Doctors discovered that his stomach lining was twice as thick as normal, allowing him to digest materials that would harm most people. Despite this, his extreme diet eventually impacted his health, and in 2007 he passed away at age 57. In 1658, a cook named Richard Rose faced one of the most extreme penalties in history after being accused of tampering with food meant for a bishop. Whether it was a prank or something more, King Henry VIII ordered a punishment so severe that it was later banned forever. Rose was subjected to a scalding ordeal, gradually exposed to boiling water in a process that lasted over 2 hours. Witnesses reported that he remained conscious far longer than expected, making this one of the most agonizing fates recorded in history. This form of punishment was deemed so inhumane that it was soon banned. In the late 19th century, a figure known only as the Leatherman wandered the roads of Connecticut and New York, dressed entirely in handmade leather clothing. He followed a strict, repetitive 365-mile loop, completing the circuit every 34 days. No matter the weather, no matter the season, locals recognized him as he silently passed through their towns, sleeping in caves, hollow trees, or abandoned buildings, never speaking more than a few words. Though he accepted food from kind strangers, he refused shelter or charity. His origins were a mystery, but rumors suggested he was a heartbroken Frenchman, forced into exile after a failed romance or financial ruin. In 1889, his body was found in one of his usual cave shelters, having succumbed to exposure and malnutrition. He carried no identification, and his past remained unknown. When his grave was later exhumed in 2011 for forensic analysis, his remains were missing. To this day, the true identity of the Leatherman, his reasons for wandering, and the fate of his remains remain a mystery. In several ancient tombs across Egypt, archaeologists have discovered mummies with horrifying frozen expressions, their mouths gaping open as if they had died mid-scream. These remains, known as screaming mummies, have puzzled historians and scientists for years. One of the most famous cases is Unknown Man E, a mummy found in the Deir el-Bahari royal cache. Unlike other pharaohs and nobles who were embalmed with great care, this mummy was wrapped in sheepskin, considered impure by ancient Egyptians and lacked the usual ceremonial inscriptions. His twisted posture and open mouth suggested a painful or violent death, leading to speculation that he was either poisoned, buried alive, or even cursed. Modern forensic analysis suggests that the open-mouthed appearance may simply be due to natural decomposition, where muscles relax after death. However, some ancient texts hint that individuals accused of treason or grave offenses were denied proper embalming rituals, forced to wander the afterlife in agony. In 1872, whalers in the icy waters of the Arctic made a chilling discovery: a ship drifting through the ice with no signs of life on board. When they boarded the vessel, later identified as the Jenny, they were met with a scene frozen in time. Literally. Inside, they found the entire crew, perfectly preserved in ice, still at their posts as if trapped in their final moments. The captain was reportedly found sitting at his desk, mid-writing, with a log entry dated 1823, meaning the ship had been drifting for nearly 50 years, carrying its frozen crew through the desolate Arctic. The whalers, horrified by the scene, took what records they could and abandoned the ship, leaving it to vanish back into the ice. In 1808, after a violent storm battered the shores of Stronsay, one of Scotland's Orkney Islands, locals discovered a massive decaying sea creature washed up on the beach, measuring over 55 feet long, with a long eel-like body, smooth skin, and what seemed like 6 limbs. The rotting carcass puzzled and horrified those who found it. Islanders speculated that it was a sea serpent, fueling fears of monstrous creatures lurking in the deep. Some claimed the beast was still moving slightly, as if it were not entirely dead. The strange remains were examined by naturalists, but due to the advanced decomposition, its true identity was never fully confirmed. While modern scientists believe it was likely a basking shark, distorted by decay, some cryptozoologists argue that it was an unknown species, possibly a deep-sea creature never recorded by science. The mystery of the Stronsay beast remains unsolved. In ancient Japan, a gruesome practice known as hitobashira, or human pillars, was believed to bring strength and protection to buildings, bridges, and dams. This ritual involved burying a living person within the foundation of a structure as an offering to the gods, ensuring its longevity and preventing disasters. One of the most well-known legends involves Matsui Castle, built in the early 1600s. According to folklore, every time workers tried to construct the castle, parts of it would mysteriously collapse. To appease the spirits, they sacrificed a young woman, burying her alive under the central pillar. Locals claimed that her ghost could be seen wandering the grounds, weeping for eternity. Another case is the Maruoka Castle, where a blind woman was said to have been buried beneath the foundation. It was believed that her soul caused water to flood the area every time the moat dried up. While no physical evidence confirms these tales, numerous historical documents suggest that human sacrifices were indeed conducted in early Japanese architecture.